Hello to all the awesome people out there. This is Mike Doyle, and welcome to the Drive80.com unnamed podcast. The point of this show is to answer the question, how do I market with video? Mainly because people like to buy video, keep it on the homepage of their website, and it's doing a fraction of the work sitting there. In this podcast, we talked to Ian Servin from Animus Studios. He's a super smart dude, and we met through the Wistia Partner Program that they're running. They started running a few months ago. Had a great conversation about video, and I felt that he could add a ton of value to anyone listening to this podcast. Some of the topics we touch on are how people are viewing video with the sound off nowadays, how to hook someone really fast in the beginning of your video, integrating video into microsite campaigns. We talk about a campaign his company did that got a lot of audience engagement on social media, and a lot more. Before we begin, feel free to subscribe to the podcast if you feel that this is something you'd like to keep listening to. And if you're watching the YouTube version, feel free to leave a comment, throw some likes, subscribe to the YouTube channel, and feel free to email me if you think that you'd be a great guest on the show or if you have a lot of knowledge about marketing with video. You can email me at mike@drive80.com. So without further ado, again, this is the Drive80.com unnamed podcast. We're interviewing Ian Servin, and let's begin. I'm going to let Ian tell a little bit about himself, and then we're just going to dive into this. I just got some questions about, strategy, how to use video, and things like that. But Ian, tell us a little bit about who you are, what you do, why you're awesome.
Sure. All right. I'm Ian. I am a creative director right now at Animus Studios. I just joined this production company agency after a while of freelancing and running an independent consulting firm. So I've been doing marketing video for a while now, but my background is actually in documentary and journalism. So I got my start as a news photographer right around the DSLR revolution. Video exploded, became like this huge thing. I jumped into it, started a department at a newspaper. That got a lot of traction. Ended up working for the university that I went to school for, doing short documentaries for them. Then got picked up by an agency, did short documentaries from them, and built their video studio. Then I went independent, and now I'm here. So that's my quick story. I was independent for a while, which I really liked, and now I have this really awesome creative team behind me consistently, which is super awesome. And my background as a documentary filmmaker in the news business has really influenced a lot of the marketing that I do, and sort of a lot of the core beliefs that I have about what good marketing should look like and how we should be leveraging storytelling to impact people emotionally rather than just sort of focus on selling a product.
Yeah.
And I think that as digital marketing has gotten a lot more mature, we're seeing a lot more focus on engagement rather than sort of vanity metrics like clicks or plays and stuff like that. And I really believe that storytelling is sort of the key differentiator between things that will be successful at a deeper level and things that will just superficially, get a lot of buzz. And so that's my perspective. That's where I come from.
Yeah,
it's all about tension and then payoff. And
yes.
So we're always trying to find conflict and then resolve it or leave it unresolved in a way that makes you do something, right? It's all very strategic.
Just actually brought up a really good point, the structure of a story. Before we get into really strategy, because that really is involved in the strategy, what do you see as maybe the three components or the two components of beginning, middle, end, I guess are the three components of telling a story?
Yeah, so I think the first part is probably the most important, and that's the hook. And so right now, just given the platforms and what channels we actively use all the time, mostly social media, the hook has to be really short, really visually engaging, and give the reader or the watcher, a reason for sticking around, because there's so much content out there that we are competing for. I think Sheryl Sandberg from Facebook at F8 or All Things D, I can't remember. Mm-hmm. She relayed this stat that the vast majority of people on Facebook view a video for 7 seconds with the sound off. And so from my point of view as a digital storyteller, as someone who's working a lot on social media, I'm always trying to find that hook that works within those confines. Like, what is going to grab somebody's attention in those 7 seconds that doesn't necessarily require audio all the time? And then how is that going to either hook them into a larger story or compress a story into that one hook, which is a lot of times what we're doing, which is really, really challenging. So besides that hook, like that's what's driving the engagement. And then you just start introducing your characters, scene setting, and really showing what the stakes are and giving people a reason to care more.
Yeah.
And then once you have that emotional investment, you can lead them down this path. And then hopefully there's some sort of emotional payoff. It's not always like a happy ending necessarily, but there has to be some sort of catharsis, some sort of reason for that person to say like, wow, like that did something, right?
Yeah.
I don't think we should be making content that is forgettable, because if you make an impact on someone, they will remember that forever, or at least for a while, right?
I think one of the coolest things I've seen recently is that video, OK Go video, with its 4 seconds to film it, and then it took like 3, whatever that was.
Absolutely.
I thought that was great because it starts off and you see within 4 seconds and it's like this was filmed in 4 seconds and it's all of this stuff, and then they go back and play it in slow motion, and the whole time you're like all anyone I think is asking is how the hell are they doing this? And it was so great, but then the payoff was Morton's salt.
Right, exactly.
And I was like, what the fuck does this have to do with anything? And it was almost like not a backlash, but people pointed out, they're like, why is this, like, how is this attached to this? And it was like one of those things where all three, I feel like they didn't all come together.
Totally. I think that's one of the key pitfalls right now. Branded content, which is basically just like sponsoring content that is not, super focused on your brand, is really popular. You see it a lot in terms of like native advertising on editorial outlets or just companies producing their own content. And I think probably the key pitfall that I see companies and brands doing or falling into is that they produce really awesome content, but that doesn't actually speak to the brand values. Yeah. And I think that can still be successful to a certain extent, because awesome content is always cool and will always be shared and people will always dig it.
Yeah.
But if your end goal is to connect that with your brand, I think you really have to start with, what is your brand value? What do they care about? And then how is this content showing one or more of those values? There's a whiskey company, the Balvenie, and their US brand has this amazing series with Anthony Bourdain. I believe it's called, I think it's called Handmade. I hope I'm not getting that wrong, but it's this really great, it's basically like mini versions of what Anthony Bourdain does, which is he goes and he interviews interesting people doing interesting things. And this topic is all about handcrafted items. So he talks with people he talks with a knife maker who's working at this really high level, and the shoemaker in LA, I think, that's just makes, I think maybe like 60 shoes a year, but they're amazing.
Yeah.
And he just interviews them about craft. It's called raw craft. That's what it is.
Okay.
And that's such a perfect example of branded content, because no, it doesn't really have anything to do with whiskey. I think they tie it back to the brand at the end by having a drink with the whiskey. They show the label a couple times, and that's really it. But what it does do is it focuses on a value that the brand has, which is craftsmanship. And so when you do that, not only are you making amazing content that will get shared and engaged with, but you're doing something that really ties back to the brand in a strong way.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the best example of what you can do. Like the OK Go video was awesome and really, really cool. But I don't know if it was as effective as it could have been, because it didn't really necessarily match up with the values of Morton Salt.
Yeah.
And I think part of that is that the salt company maybe hasn't made very clear what their values are. And so I think that's another point that I'm thinking about a lot these days, is getting outside the deliverable and thinking about campaigns. That's the scale I want to live in. And that's the whole context around the different videos. Because if you set that up right, then your individual pieces of content can be a lot more successful, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like in talking about strategy too, which we'll jump into, it's like where you put it and how you put it out there in the strategy should tie back to your mission as a company. It's
Absolutely.
like where if your mission is, I don't know, I can't think of anything on the fly, but like if it is about giving back or like, making the world more green, or a nonprofit, I don't think you want to turn that into retargeting ads on these like shitty celebrity gossip sites.
Right.
You know, and
Absolutely.
it's because it doesn't fall in line with like, well, what are we trying to talk to and who are we trying to talk to? So like,
Yep.
so let's say like, so talking about strategy, like let's say that you were looking, you know, you were in charge of that. How do they call it? The craft what?
Raw craft.
Raw craft. Like, let's say that, all right, they came to you and they said, all right, we have this idea. We want to do all these videos about people with their raw craft. Now, as video production companies, or like for me to do an animation, like it's almost we have to think before we even tell the story of like, all right, well, where is it going to be used? And do we need to do certain clips? Because that defines how you actually do the script, right?
Absolutely.
So, like, let's say, you know, they came to you, like, in your head where you're like, can you think of ideas and said, like, I would do this, or you see how they're using it and say, like, they've done this and it leads me here, and this is the call to action?
Yeah, so I think when I'm first working with a brand and sort of trying to get a handle on what their voice is and what their priorities are, understanding the channels right off the bat is super important, and understanding that context. Knowing sort of like their overall themes that they're trying to hit on throughout the year and having an understanding of their content calendar is really crucial. I think that's probably the first thing. And then you sort of work backwards from there and you find the videos. So for this type of content, you know, the first thing I would have done is sort of looked at an audit of what other content are they putting out there? How are they putting it out there? And then how connected should this content be? You know, this is the type of content that stands alone really well. And so maybe that means having a separate sort of sub-brand that's just the show, and making the branding even more subtle and not having that necessarily live on their page. I think this series ended up being on YouTube under their like US brands YouTube account. Okay. And I think that was okay because for the most part on YouTube, you're really not, the algorithm, the way that it works is you're relying a lot on searches and recommendations and stuff like that to get views rather than necessarily sending people to like a branded archive the way that you might do on your own website, or you might send people to like a Facebook or a Twitter profile where it's really about you.
Right.
So I think that was successful for that reason. But a lot of these types of content campaigns, I feel like, work really well with microsites where you can completely own the entire experience for your client. So you can have your own archive up there, you can brand everything, and you can really control sort of how the end viewer like travels through the story.
Yeah.
And so that's something that probably with this type of sponsored content, I always recommend, because I think YouTube is really great for a lot of things. And I think if you make something that has really, really mainstream appeal, it can be a successful strategy. But for most marketing campaigns, your audience is actually a lot smaller than you probably think. And so how can you make an experience that's really custom tailored to them? And I think the reality is a platform like YouTube is probably not the answer.
Yeah.
You know, having something where you can own it from start to finish is a better strategy.
So let's say you had like a mini site where, like, I could see it too, where somehow someone clicks somewhere, it leads them to this site, and now it's like you kind of captured them in this mini world about all this stuff where the branding's all there. And I'm picturing something like this. It would have like, you know, the bottle of like they are crafting and like, you know, whiskey and stuff like all over, and then they'd have you know, click here for the story, and then I'm thinking like after the story, the powerful thing about YouTube is that you can use the annotations, which only work on a desktop and not phones, but now they have this new thing where you can actually put the videos on the player at the very end, like the last 20 seconds.
Right.
You can control that, or they have like the iCards. So I'm thinking that if there's some way to integrate that with watching the next video, and keeping them there, you know. But it's like, would that video, if you click it, could you take them to a specific page on your site so it's still there, so they're not leaving? You know, I don't know if they can do that. Do you know?
Yeah, well, I imagine you could definitely do something like that either with Wistia's annotations that are built in, or with their custom CTA. You know, you could throw in a little bit of code in there to skip to the next story. And you can probably do that in a way that's dynamic, that's sort of independent of, that's not tied to like a very linear sort of progression. You can also do playlists and stuff like that in Wistia. So there are definitely ways to do it in the player. And then I think the other really cool thing about a microsite is that you control everything but the player too, right? So you can put links in unique ways, and you can format stories in really unique ways where you're not just sort of sending someone to a page with a video on it, but there's text and there's photography and there's, hyperlinks. There's ways to go in depth and sort of explore in a really organic way that feels really native to the web and not sort of tied into a platform.
So I think in that sense too, you got to be careful, because I think a lot of people, they see a lot of tools and they start throwing them all at it. Where,
right, yeah,
like I get kind of thrown off because you have the whole cards thing on YouTube, and they'll pop up 5 seconds in and say like, watch this other video, and I'm like, I still got 2 minutes left in this one, or 30 seconds in this one, or potentially 10 minutes if I'm really engaged. And they keep throwing this in front of me, and I'm like, dude, like, put it in the right spot, or don't try to get me to leave here, because it's not, it's like, it's too much.
Totally. I think that you can start throwing everything at the wall, just like you said, and you'll get to the point where there's so many things for the viewer to do that their attention is not going to be focused. And you want someone's attention to be focused, because otherwise how can they really engage with the story or really have an emotional connection with a piece of content? They really can't. And so that's why I think video is really powerful, is because by like the very nature of the format, you are sort of along for the ride. And so I think when you look at the context of everything else, it's really important to be able to focus on that content when you're watching it, and then provide, other things to do, other avenues to go to after the video is done playing. That's one of the things I think YouTube doesn't do really well, because they are really optimizing for engagement with the platform and not necessarily with the videos.
Yeah.
Is that, if you're watching a YouTube video, the default view, there are a million things that you can click on and go see. And all of those thumbnails and those titles are designed to get you to click. And so it's really not focused on watching videos. It's focused on staying on YouTube.
Yeah.
And I think that can lend to some problems sometimes when people are trying to run a campaign just through there.
Yeah, it's too much. I mean, I even though I know that exists, I'll be watching a video and my eye just starts kind of trailing right. I'm like, oh, what is that? What is that? It's like, oh, I got to go there now, and then I'm there. And I'm like, oh, I got to go somewhere else. I mean, it almost like my brain starts to scramble like a little bit after that.
And I think that's what we don't want as video marketers, as storytellers. We are trying to provide a very purposeful experience.
Yeah.
And so I think the more that we can pare down on those features and really do something that is enabling focus, I think the better experience that our viewers are going to have, right?
So, like, let me dive into that, because I think that real world experience. I mean, I think storytelling works. I think great storytelling is when it's personalized for someone's real experience in life.
Sure.
And because I think you get more value out of it, because they're like, I did this and this is how I got out of it, and you can attach yourself to it more. So I think that in this scenario of like strategy, I think that people can get a lot more out of it. We could talk all day about what we think we can do, but like, I'd love to pick your brain on some things that you've done where, and the success could, success can be defined in so many different ways, but you might be like, well, I don't know if this was successful, but I did this. Like, I would just love to hear like what you've done and what you've seen, and maybe there are some success stories, but just give people ideas if they have this content. Oh, I could try to do that, and
sure,
see how it goes.
Well, yeah, there are so many tools. Like Wisty, I think, is a really good video host, and you have, you can build a site really easily around that content. Promoting stuff on Facebook and Twitter is also a lot easier than it used to be. There's a lot of resources around that. And I think the most important thing is that getting back to that campaign focus and always thinking beyond a single video. When I think of the people that we've helped the most, it's been the people that we've been able to work with on a long-term basis, where we've been able to produce either a series of content or multiple series of content where, we can really own the conversation. Because otherwise, if you're just putting a single point of contact out there in terms of video, it's, social media, the internet moves really, really fast. And if you just put one piece of content out there, it's going to get old really, really quickly. And so you have to figure out ways to, stockpile that content and deliver it, in a serial basis, because that's obviously going to be the most successful. Looking back, I think one of my favorite projects that I've worked on was actually for a relatively small client, a regional jewelry store. And so we were, at the agency, we were owning their social media presence. And so we had a lot of freedom And we had a lot of different ideas that we wanted to pitch to them. And our first idea was this thing called Love Stories. And so we built this very simple Tumblr page. All it was like a little bit of text, video right in front of the person, and then a couple arrows for navigation so you could scroll to different stories. And we didn't even shoot actual video. We shot stills and we recorded audio. And we did these really powerful essays about people and their relationship to the concept of love, people who had found love later in life, people who had lost people recently, and sort of their stories of loss and their stories of remembrance. And we did this in a way that was not at all product focused. And then we built this microsite to it. We also did snippets that we shared on social. And what we found was really amazing. We had this brand that was already fairly well established in the community. And what we did is we took that conversation that was offline and we brought it online. We brought a ton of people that would already probably be talking about this brand with their friends and their family. And they started talking about it and sharing it, especially on Facebook. That was our focus.
That's awesome.
And we got all of this organic feedback and these organic comments. And it just compelled people to share their own stories of love and loss. And it was so powerful, because we weren't selling a product. We were just saying, these are the things that we care about as a brand, and what we're going to do, we're going to use our voice to empower people to share their stories. And we're going to empower our audience to share their stories in the comments, right?
Yeah.
And we're just going to bring those conversations up.
Real quick.
That's really powerful.
I think that's freaking amazing. And I love how people share their stories. Like, did they share it organically, or did you put in there, like, what's your story? Post below. Like, did you tell them what to do?
Yeah, we didn't even have a strong call to action. I think initially it wasn't necessarily even on our radar that was going to happen. We were really focused on like sharing the stories of the people that we took photos of and interviewed. We weren't expecting, I think, the big outpour of organic content. And then once that started happening, I think a big part of that is when you deliver content, community management is really important. So having someone who is actually monitoring social media and interacting with people and helping them engage, that was really crucial. And so we didn't really have a strong call to action in the content itself. But then once people started sharing their stories, we made sure to drop in the comments and talk about how appreciative we were of them, and just help people connect, which I think is really, really crucial.
So, okay, so you suggested like getting involved. So don't just like put it out there in space and say comment and then just like let it go. Like literally dive in as well. So that's that extra step I think that people miss, is that's how you connect. That's the best thing about social media, is having that conversation.
Yep.
It's like being able to, instead of just being this big billboard and speaking and yelling at people, it's like opening that door and saying, oh, like, come on in. Like, now we're going to talk to you,
Yeah. I think that's the best thing, especially if you're a smaller brand. If you can really find that audience where what you produce resonates enough to start a conversation, that's great.
Yeah.
Because I don't think we necessarily want, like, every brand is going to say, like, we want people talking about us. But is that really what you want? I think you just want people talking. And you want people making those subtle emotional connections to your brand. Because especially with the jewelry store, those are large purchases that you're not necessarily making every day. And so we realized early on that it does not make sense to make a video and then have our KPI be like, did we increase, immediate sales after this?
Right.
That really wasn't our point. What we wanted to do was show people that maybe weren't tuned into the conversation that was going on offline, especially a younger audience, that this, store, this company, this brand is really connected to their community and really cares about the stories that they have an impact in.
Awesome.
It was really powerful, and it accomplished our goals 100%.
So yeah, man, I think that's awesome. The one thing, and two, just to keep track of time, we're almost about 30 minutes in. I would love to keep this sermon, but I feel like we could talk about this for like 2 hours. And I know
I could talk all day about this.
I know. It's like we just like
one side. Like, this is just about the content. Like, my whole other focus is workflow and processes, because I think people like that's I think probably the hardest part for a lot of people is knowing where to start. And if you don't have any sort of internal workflow, starting becomes even harder. And if you don't have an established workflow, it's also a lot harder to improvise. Once you have a routine, it becomes a lot easier to say, like, okay, well, let's change this variable. Let's tweak that. And so I think once people start thinking with that mindset too, that can be really powerful to say like, okay, this is like a workflow for how we want to work with clients and how we want to understand their problems. And once you get that down, then you master it and you can start improvising and doing new things and figuring out ways to optimize and get, even more effective and make even cooler shit, which I think is the goal, right?
Yeah, I mean, especially and you can only build off of that. Like I always sit down with clients. I mean, now I really start doing it with prospects and say what is your goal? Like, here we are, here's your goal. What are you doing in between this space to achieve this? And they love that. And I'll pull a whiteboard out and say what is it that we can do? I'm like, let's say you have the video in your possession right now. I'm like, what do you see yourself doing with it? And they're always like, well, we could post it to YouTube. We're gonna put it on our website, and that's all they're thinking about. And I'm like, all right, well, maybe we break it up, or maybe we take the final clip, because I mean, for the animation, we are designing anything is 60 to 90 seconds, and that's it. We don't with going to film. I mean, you can get so much B-roll. You can do clips of the testimonials, or interviews you're getting, and that aren't even in the video. I mean, you have just hours and hours and hours of footage, and I feel like you can take that, you can take a clip of it. 10 seconds, watch more here by clicking here, or watch our outtakes, and there's so many things that can lead them in all these areas, but it's you have to kind of know the end goal first of well, here's all these avenues we can go in. We can utilize Facebook, we utilize Instagram, but let's dive deeper, and if we did have Instagram, can we post these clips, or can we put them on stories now and give a deal maybe with stories only have 24 hours and it's gone, and say, hey, if you see this story, here's the link. You have to actually physically put it in to go do this, but you had 24 hours, this deal's gone.
Yep.
Things like that, and it's video related.
Yeah, there are a lot of ways to do that, and I think people, when they're coming into a video, they're sort of poisoned by this mindset of we need a deliverable, we need a video, and so you'll shoot this video and you'll make the content for the video, and then we'll publish the video and we'll share the video, and that's it. And it's that's really not what marketing is. Marketing is a conversation. Marketing is you talking to people. And so video is just one aspect of it. So when you start thinking about partnerships and thinking what are we trying to accomplish, and you start with the problem instead of the solution, I was really lucky that my first agency position was at a really young agency that in a lot of ways was a startup and was really connected to the startup community. And one of the things that people who found startups know is that you can't start with a solution without a problem. You have to start with a problem. The most successful startups solve a problem really, really well. And so that's why I think the first probably half of our discovery and sort of onboarding process is all about being able to articulate what the problem is, and then how we're going to solve it on a high level.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, making the video is not the hardest part. There are a million people who can shoot really awesome video. But knowing what to do with it and knowing how to share it and how to position it, I think that is the crucial part. And so I think, whether you're an agency or you're a freelancer or an independent consultant, however you position yourself, whatever kind of company you work with, you should always be thinking about partnerships and how to leverage that long term. Because without that overall context, you're never going to be able to create a plan that can really succeed, because you're always hampered by the deliverable. You're sort of chained by that.
Yeah.
And there are so many other restrictions. Why would you make that one? That's the easiest thing to get away from.
That's such a good point. Yeah, man. I say just to kind of wrap it up a bit. Again, I mean, I swear, I just want to talk to you for another 2 hours. I would love to have you back on this again and just break down more things. But before we go, I'd love just to keep on and give real experience. Can you talk about just another campaign you did where it had a really cool outcome?
Sure. So I'm working with a company right now that themselves, they're a marketing company. And so they have a lot of challenges because traditionally they've done a lot of B2B work, and the content they've produced has been pretty dry and pretty corporate. And they're working on a rebrand, and they're repositioning what they do and who they're talking to and who their audiences are. And so they're trying to figure out, how can we talk about ourselves in a better way? And that's probably a really common problem with a lot of brands, is that they just struggle to talk about themselves. And so one of the really crucial steps that we did on this was we spent a lot of time working on the voice document. and what the brand voice is. So what do they sound like? What kinds of things do they talk about? Who are they talking about it to, and sort of like what the tone is? And from there, we worked backwards. We came up with a set of themes for the year. And then from those themes, we came up with sort of keystone projects. And then from those keystone projects, we came up with a lot of supporting content. And in a relatively short amount of time, we created this whole outline for a yearly content strategy for them. And we haven't fully implemented it. It's an ongoing process. But as we've been moving along, it has been amazing the transformation that we've seen with their online presence in terms of who they're talking to online, where they're getting organic feedback from, who they're able to reach. Mm-hmm. And then also outside, like offline, there are a lot of sales reps within the company and a lot of people that are customer facing, and the empowerment that they have, because now they can point to really human communication that explains the different things that they do. That is a huge benefit. And I think one of the things that people don't always understand, because they're really focused on sort of the general public or whatever your audience is, and you're not thinking necessarily about how you can leverage video internally. So even with external facing videos, right, that's a huge tool, especially for sales-driven companies, sales-driven brands. And so being able to have that ability to point to that piece of content and say to a customer, this really explains what we're about, makes the sales process a whole lot easier and builds those interpersonal connections a lot quicker, which is, a really crucial part of the sales process. So that campaign was really successful because not only have we helped the brand get more confident about who they are, which is one of the really great byproducts of running a really solid campaign, is that kind of confidence that they have. But we've also given that same confidence to the people that are actually customer facing. And we've also produced a lot of really awesome content that people really like, which is great.
Yeah, for the creative side, you get like that. You get that outlet, just being like, look at this thing though. But like, really take a look at this. The content itself is great, but also, people like, as creatives, every time I produce anything, I'm always thinking of who creatively is going to look at this and is going to rip it apart or say like, you didn't do this right. But if you have a good piece of content out there, you're like, it got the job done. It's doing all these other effects too, and it looks freaking awesome.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, is just stop thinking about video as a unit of stuff. Just think about it as another extension of a brand's voice. And so you can really think outside of sort of the different frameworks. So you don't have to produce a 30-second spot anymore. You can produce something that's 3 seconds long. You can produce something that's an hour long. We recently produced like a feature-length documentary. And like, that's crazy, and it's doing really well and actually won some awards, which is amazing.
That's awesome.
But like, you just have to get beyond the format and think about what you're really trying to accomplish, which is just communicate. It's really just talking.
Yeah, it's awesome, man. Well, thanks, Ian, for taking some time out of your day, and
absolutely,
like right before this lunch hour.
Yeah.
So do you have anything like you want to plug, or anything you don't have to, but this is like your
sure.
chance to say something.
So the obvious answer is Animus Studios is the creative production house that I work at. We do a lot of really innovative work with video. We sort of come from a documentary background ourselves, and we produce all kinds of things, from really tightly scripted TV spots to really innovative digital content. So we're at animusstudios.com, so definitely check us out. One of the things that I'm working on as a new hire is working on ways to engage with the audience that we have beyond our clients. And so we're going to be producing a lot of educational content and really figuring out better ways to market ourselves. I think that's one of the bigger struggles that pretty much all creatives have, is they may be really good at client work, but when it comes to actually speaking about themselves, they struggle.
Yeah.
It's hard to find the time. It's also just a really hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So that's one of the things that we're working on. I'm really excited about that.
That's awesome, dude. That's pretty much it. So, Ian, again, thank you, and enjoy your day.
Thanks, Mike. Great chatting with you.
You too, man.
All right, that is the show, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you said, yes, Mike, I certainly did, then please message any of your marketing friends and tell them what cool tips you learned that could possibly benefit their lives and make them want to listen to this podcast. Also, check out drive80.com if you are struggling to explain what your company does. We accomplish this in a minute or so with animation. If you have any questions, please send me an email at mike@drive80.com. I'd love to hear some feedback. Tell me what you like. Tell me the things I could fix to really just make these episodes better, really give you guys a lot of value, because, again, that is the point. I really want to be very focused on this. So you're listening to it. Every time you hear it, there's something new, and it really, you could take an action with it right there and grow your business or grow your clients' businesses, which will then help you grow your business because they'll want to pay you more. Again, Mike Doyle, drive80.com. Go in peace.